Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to INSPINAR, your inspirational seminar. INSPINAR is a 30-minute conversation designed to empower us all with the roadmap for a more peaceful and productive life. I'm your host, Dr. Nidhi Gupta. Today, I have a very special guest with me, and we are going to be talking about something that we don't talk about often. What is holding us back from doing what we wish we could do? For me, I wish I could take singing classes. I wish I could learn swimming and I could learn scuba diving. What is holding me back? I think there is fear that is holding me back. Fear of what if? What if something goes wrong? What if it doesn't go as planned? What if I have to give up something else in order to do what I want to do now? So, what are the possibilities when we crush fear? To introduce my guest, Rhea Kinnard. Rhea is the president and CEO of Kinnard Associates, a marketing communications company with an emphasis on diversity and inclusion. Rhea founded the company in 1997 and recently celebrated a milestone of 25 years in entrepreneurship. Her success with the company also includes two magazines, the African American Guide to Nashville and Culture Magazine, both first of their kind in the city of Nashville and established to help diversity voices in corporate and tourism. In addition, Rhea is the founder of the Dorothy Marie Kinnard Foundation, established in 2012 to raise awareness on the escalating rise of diabetes, particularly among African Americans. Rhea currently resides in Nashville, Tennessee, and has two adult children, Gregory, 36, and Destiny, 27. Rhea, welcome to INSPINAR.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. I'm listening to that explanation, that introduction. I was like, who is that? But thank you so much for having me on the show. And also, I wanted to say we are excited on November the 5th because we're going to have you as a guest at our Lunch and Learn event. So people are very excited about that and just want to be able to talk with you and learn more about what it is you have to share.
Thank you so much, Rhea. Thank you for the opportunity to share my mission with you as you share your mission with us. So let me begin by asking this, Rhea. How would you describe fear? What does fear look like to you?
Oh, like this. You know, when you pose that question to me, what are the possibilities when we crush fear? You know, I thought about fear, F-E-A-R. And so I went back and I said, let me just kind of explore that and think about what that is. And one of the interesting things that I came across is the descriptives that people use for fear, the acronym. And I heard people describe it as forget everything and run, face everything and rise. And then I've heard them refer to it as false evidence appearing real. But I think the one thing that we can all agree with, it is the one thing, that one essential thing that debilitates us from moving ahead in life, you know, and getting to the other side. I've always said you have to face fear head on in order to get to the other side, because a lot of times that's where purpose and meaning is. And until you get there, then you will never know. I think when we allow fear to take over our lives, it just debilitates our greatness. I think each and every one of us are here to do great things. And how will you ever know that unless you eliminate the face of fear? And it's not an easy thing to do, as we all have to face it. But I think that is something we're going to all have to deal with. That was the acronym aspect of it. Then, you know, of course, you have the Webster's definition. And I think it's intense emotion. It's this intense, distressing emotion that is triggered by the perception. It's a perception of danger that may or may not be real. So it doesn't always have to be real. And I share a funny story with you. I was a young girl. I watched this movie, and you may have heard of this interesting movie called Psycho. Well, there's this scene, that has become a part of pop culture, where the lady's in the shower, and Anthony Perkins comes in. He's dressed as this old woman, and he comes in, and that music, that ever distressing music, and he's stabbing her. This is the craziest thing, Dr. Gupta, but to this day, I will not take a shower with the shower curtain closed. Can you believe that? I'm just going ahead and putting it out there and sharing with everybody. I will not take a shower with the shower curtain closed. And I know that that's not real, but I just said, just in case it's like a bad day for me, I don't want to take that chance. So, I don't take showers with shower curtains closed, believe it or not. So that, again, is the perception. It may not even be real, but a lot of times, sometimes we take in information and it can do things to our psyche and to cause fear. So, I've since learned, maybe I have to lay off on the scary movies because, they tend to affect me in ways that are probably not very good. So that's another aspect of fear, the Webster's definition, and just this emotion and what it triggers and the danger that we feel may or may not exist in our lives. I also did some research, because I said, what are we fearful of? What are the fears, of us? And so I looked up something and it said the top 3 American fears. I was like, let me see what that is. And so the first one was public speaking. And that's really tough for so many of us to get out there. And someone once told me that when you're afraid of public speaking, usually it's rooted in an insecurity, but it may be more than that, because I know a lot of secure people, they just don't like to speak publicly. So that was one. The second one is fear of heights. I fall into that category as well. I don't like to fly. And what's so funny is when I started my company, 99% of the stuff that I had to do involved flying. So I would get on these flights, and I'll tell you, the turbulence would kick in, and I was a wreck. And to this day, I don't feel any different. I've been doing this for over 25 years, and I still don't like to fly. But what it taught me and what I've learned, again, I have to face fear. I have to face it. And again, as I said, getting to the other side. You have to get to that other side. If I've got a job to do for a client, I got to get to the other side to get the job done. So I have just learned to, face it head on and keep it moving, because that's the only way that I know to conquer that. And I don't want to live my life with a lot of regrets. I've often felt that it's the things in life that I will regret that's going to do more harm to me than it is the things that I do, so I'm going to just tackle it face on. I may be afraid at times to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway and come out on the other side, because that's where I'm supposed to be. Maybe the results won't be there, but at least, I gave it a shot and gave it my all. And that's important. That's what I feel like I need to live with. So, and if I can add another thing, that we can get a little deeper into this. Again, with the research that I was doing, Ruth Soukup is like a famous psychologist and author. And she actually wrote a book on the 7 faces of fear. So she said fear is rooted in these 7 things. And so, of course, it's too many for me to memorize, so I can read those off and share a little bit of that. One is the people pleaser. So she said that this is the fear of disapproval and fear of not being liked, expressed in the form of weak boundaries and putting others' needs before your own well-being. So I thought that was interesting, because I know some people pleasers, and they're really wonderful people, but just this need to please. The next one was the procrastinator. This is the fear of making mistakes. This shows up as over planning to the point of analysis paralysis, as she calls it, of spending all of your time researching, and none of your time taking action. Perfectionism is an overlapping quality as well. The rule follower. This is a fear of authority. This person is afraid of breaking the rules and doing something in a way which is not supposed to be done. You have the outcast. This is the fear of rejection, which often, ironically, causes this person to reject others first so that they cannot be rejected. They're highly self-motivated and driven to succeed, and they feel the need to prove themselves, but they have trouble collaborating and working in groups. The self-doubter. This is the fear of inadequacy, of not being good enough, which causes the self-doubter to forego opportunities, play it safe, and not take risks. And they can also be very highly critical of others. The excuse maker. This is the fear of taking responsibility of being blamed, which shows up in the form of always having a justification as to why a person can't pursue a goal or why the outcome isn't their fault. And then the pessimist. This is the fear of adversity. This is often held by people who have been through an immense amount of pain and trauma. The pessimist gets locked into different patterns of negative self-talk and self-pity and believes they have it worse than so many others. And after I read through those, I said, I would probably put myself as the self-doubter, maybe not so extreme with some of the other components of that, but definitely some self-doubt because as I've journeyed through life, there are things I've wanted to do and accomplish, and I just wasn't sure if I could do it. Didn't know. Some things I are still, in effect mode, and you still work on them and try to pursue them. And then there are some things I still feel maybe out of my realm, like, wow, can I really do that? Is that really possible? But again, I look at so many of the great people around the world, and I'm sure they had the very same thoughts that I did. Some of them may have had even less opportunity than I did, but yet and still, they still found a way to press forward and to pursue their dreams and to go on to greatness. So as I said before, when we do not crush it, it debilitates and it limits us on our greatest potential. And who knows, where that can be.
Wow. When you describe those 7 phases of fear, some dimensions of each of those phases resonates with me. I would have never thought that procrastination and perfectionism could be a phase of fear.
I know. That's what I thought too. And I wouldn't have personally put them together. I said, I don't even see where they go, but I'm not the psychologist. But that was how they described that particular one.
So you mentioned that as you've gone through life, you have had situations where you've needed to make tough decisions that were overcome with fear, but you still had to make it because you needed to know what is on the other side. Is there an experience, Rhea, that you would be willing to share with us where you had to deal with fear that you had to overcome, and then you found something completely unexpected on the other side?
Oh, yes. Well, back after I had finished college and then got into corporate America and began working, I went through a period in my life because at that time I was a single mom. I was raising a 10-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so I've got these faces looking at me, and I'm a responsible mom, and I've got to make some things happen for them and in their life. And so working in corporate America, that's the safety net. My life is safe and secure. I don't like it because there's so many limitations placed on my life. You got to be here this time, you leave this time, you got to do this. And I didn't like that. I mean, there were times I would have to literally finagle my schedule to take later or a longer lunch to get maybe to my son's field day at school, or I'd have to maneuver the time of the day, come in extra early so I can get off early, maybe because I needed to pick my daughter up from daycare. It was always something. And I just decided that I needed more control of my life. So I thought about it and thought about it, and it was the most terrifying thing to not only think about, but to actually do. I mean, I've got to do, well, how do I do this? Because the thought of failure could not even be an option. So that was fearful. I can't even fail at this. So I thought about it, and what I began doing is putting a plan together. How do I make this happen? What are some essential things? Well, I need some resources. I need to make sure that just in case something happens, I can still keep, things intact financially. I needed to do some research to understand. I was degreed, I was educated. So why can't I take what I know and use that? And so what I ended up doing was taking that leap of faith. And in 1997, I launched my company and set sail because, again, I needed to take control of my professional future and to make sure that I was present in the lives of my children. So I set sail. Dr. Gibb, I found myself in places that I could not have imagined. I also had the ability, being a business owner, that you can manage things. You don't always have to be very, very busy. You manage it the way that you want. There were some things that I would not take because I knew it would require too much of me. And then there were things that I thought was a good fit for what I was doing with the business, at that time. And so you'll find yourself having to make all sorts of decisions. You wear many different hats, but I was up to the challenge because it was for me. And I had a much bigger purpose in doing that. And here's the kicker. This year, I celebrate 25 years being in business. And I definitely have to say it's probably one of the proudest things that I have ever done. I can look back and I'm in the face of fear and I was terrified, but I took that chance and, set sail, did this, and came out on the other side. I now have two just amazing adult children that are living their best lives and doing just fantastic things. And sometimes I sit back and I think, had I not done that, what would life be like for me? And it may not have been bad, but I don't know that it would be the way that it is. For the last 25 years, I've been able to make the decisions that I want to make. I could do things my way, and it really gave me a very strong sense of being in purpose because I felt like I had a voice. I have something to contribute. You don't always get that in corporate America. You don't always get to have a voice, And so I'm really, really thankful and grateful that I did take that leap of faith.
Wow. The story that you describe where you were in corporate side of things and then you went out on your own, I think a lot of us aspire to do something like that, but money gets in the way. The fear of finances, the fear of managing finances, the fear that I've never done the business side of things. For me, I'm a physician. I never trained to be a business administrator in medical school. Nobody taught me how to manage money or how to set up a business, how to be an entrepreneur. So those fears hold us back, hold many of us back, and we hesitate to break the status quo. We make our peace with how things are because we are fearful. We are scared of what lies on the other end. What if it doesn't go as planned? What will people say about me? They'll tell me, oh, see, we told you this wasn't the right thing for you to do. You should have kept doing what you were supposed to do. So what advice, Rhea, would you give to somebody like me or other people like me who are at that curve, at that decision-making point of whether to keep going or to take a different direction? How can they overcome their fear?
Well, as I had mentioned before, even in my own personal story, you just have to face it head on. There are just times when I have literally been just shaking in my boots for something I have to do that I'm just terrified to do. And, I reach a point where I just decide. I make an intentional decision to say, I'm just going to do it. I'll be shaking doing it, but I'm going to do it, And I think we have to just be intentional about our lives. We have to decide, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put a plan together and I'm going to make this happen and I'm going to do it. And really, you have to face it head on. It's not going to be easy, but I think, again, once we reach deep inside of ourselves and we look and find the courage that is necessary, that is needed, that is a must, then I think we can put ourselves in those positions where we can face it head on, but it has to be dealt with. And I was reading something that said, what fear says basically is that whatever you're fearful of, that means that's work in that area that's needed in your life. And so I said, that's a really interesting and good way to look at it. So if you're fearful about something, it's just more practice, more work, more that needs to be done, in your life. Now, there's some things I wouldn't say that fits. Like if I see a wild animal, that just is, I'm going to be just, the adrenaline is just going to go haywire. That's just the way it is, So there's some things in our life. I mean, fear is just, if we see it as an imminent present danger, it's just going to affect us that way. But I think if it comes to our own well-being and our future and goals and dreams and things like that we have, I think we just have to do, our homework, do some research and figure out a plan of action and how we can make that happen. And I think it's when we reach those heights, as the new phrase, as people talk about this vibrational frequency that we're all elevating toward, I think when we reach those heights, in life, my goodness, how amazing a people we become, and we see it played out every day. We watch TV, we look at celebrities, they were afraid, but you know what? They made a decision. I'm going to make this happen for me. I have one shot at this thing called life. I'm going to make this happen for me. And so they went out and they made it happen. And I really admire and respect people like that. I really do.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that insight with us, Rhea. That's really important. Everything that you said, if we could implement maybe even 10% of that in our daily lives, our lives will be better tomorrow.
Absolutely. I agree. I totally agree. And, I talk to a lot of family and friends from time to time, and they'll share their fears, with me. And we just, the conversations are good too. That's another thing that we can do. It's just talk to people who can help us, work through those fears in our lives. I mean, everybody doesn't want to conquer the world. Some people just want to deal with fear on a minuscule level. Maybe they're just dealing with some personal things, maybe they're dealing with, some things in the past. How do I get over that? Because I'm fearful and I'm afraid of how it makes me feel, So I try to, be that anchor, for family and friends and really anybody. If there's something that I can share to help them not only just get over fear, but just, make their life a little more impactful.
That is true. Fear, overcoming fear or crushing fear does not necessarily mean going out and doing something grand, doing something adventurous. It doesn't have to be skydiving. It doesn't have to be bungee jumping or completely quitting everything that you have built so far and taking on a new life. It could be the little things, like you said, personal lives, relationships, kids, little things that you can change on a day-to-day basis that can completely shift the energy in your life and that of other people in your life. That's amazing. So I want to pause here and see if we probably have a minute or two for questions. See if anybody in the audience who has joined us today have any questions for us. What is it that you are fearful of? Are you trying to overcome any fears in your life? Do you need help?
See, there it is. They're afraid to tell me.
But like you said, public speaking can sometimes be intimidating. That could be one phase of fear, or just the process of, it takes time. Like if you've
Yeah.
heard this conversation for the first time,
Yeah.
it takes a little bit of an introspection to see, am I really fearful of something? Those 7 phases of fear, which one of that applies to me, right? It takes a little bit of a thought process to come up with, what am I fearful of?
Right.
So true.
Exactly.
So anything else that you would like to share with us, Rhea? Anything else that your life experiences have helped you shape yourself, your children, that we can learn from?
You know, I am just this big proponent of self. And, you know, I talk with my brother, he's actually on today too, listening. But I just preach as much as I can to people how important self is, because I think too often we're out here and we're doing so much searching, you know, whether it's, you know, for love or for friends or, and there's nothing wrong with that. But make sure that you have done the homework with yourself first. You know, I was driving down the street the other day and I came up with this thought came to my mind, and it was cracking the code on self. Everything begins with you. I got to do a book on that, because I said, you know, that's what we have to do. We have to crack the code to ourselves. What makes you tick? What makes you happy? You know, what do you want in life? You know, what is your purpose? Even understanding your purpose, because a lot of people don't really understand why they're here. Just some of the most amazing and great people. I talk with people, the ideas and the things that they have, and I was like, wow, you should do that. But there's that insecurity or that self-doubt that they're not, you know, sure that they can do. So I would just really encourage people to spend some time with yourself. I spend a lot of time alone, a lot of time. And I do it by choice because I enjoy my own company. You know, whether I'm meditating, whether I'm thinking, writing, or whatever it is I'm doing. But I spend a lot of time there. And I'm always discovering new things about myself, you know. And as I had mentioned to you on my bucket list, one day I hope to relocate. I'll still have a home here, but I want to go out and travel and live somewhere else and know what that experience is like. You know, I'm like, well, why not? Why can't I? I can. So, you know, that's something I want to do. But other than that, just self. And it is not selfish, you know, to put yourself first and to be there for yourself. And I've often said this, you know, to people, friends, you know, if we don't take care of ourselves first, we don't have anything else to give others. Sometimes we get it backwards. We think we're supposed to go out and do all these things for others, for your kids, and then we find ourselves bankrupt. You know, that's because we haven't taken care of ourselves. But if you take care of yourself to the most optimum measure, you are so much better for other people. You're just so much better for them. So my advice to people is start with self. Take care of yourself first and make sure you're putting yourself in a good place and being good to you.
And making that distinction, like you said, between being self and being selfish is really,
right.
really, really important. Now, before we close the episode today, Rhea, I want to hear about the Lunch and Learn. I want to hear a little bit about what you are doing to raise awareness for diabetes.
Yes, well, on Saturday, November the 5th, we are going to hold a Lunch and Learn, and yourself, Dr. Kinnard, along with 2 other amazing medical specialists, going to serve as our panelists. And we're just inviting the community to come out to get all of this wealth of knowledge from you guys, to ask questions. We're going to also have free screenings. You can go and learn all of your learn information about your health so that you know the things that you need to do to improve upon that. We're going to have free goodie bags. We're going to have free lunch. So it's going to be an exciting event. And so we just want to really invite the community to come out and be part of something we think can be very life-changing.
Thank you for sharing that, Rhea, and thank you for being on INSPINAR today. It was an absolute joy to have you. Just having this 30-minute conversation with you has lifted my spirits, and I think I'm going to have a great rest of my day. So thank you for making that happen.
You were
I
so
will. Thank you. I'm going to wrap up today's episode with let's reconnect with what truly matters. Let's reconnect with real life. Let's reconnect with health, joy, and efficiency. Let's ungrip devices and grip life. I will see you all next week. Thank you for joining us on INSPINAR.
Thank you.